In order to find out if you've been doing this right, if you've got a black and white drawing especially, let's make a rectangle that goes behind our drawing here. So I've got a fill in green because it's a color I don't really have in this, and I'm on a layer called test color. Any layer will do as long as it's at the very bottom. It can go above your reference graphic. It needs to go underneath everything that you've created. I'm going to draw that rectangle right here on that layer, and it's going to be green. And that's going to show me if what I've drawn is transparent or not. I may have thought that this was a white star with a black outline, but we need to take a closer look at it. I'm going to select it. You can click on it if it's just that one thing, selecting the path on that layer or that layer if there's only one thing on it. And I'm going to Control plus and zoom in. And when you do that, you saw that there were a lot of anchor points. By switching to my direct selection tool, you can see that this is not a stroke around a shape. It is a shape that goes around in the path of a star. So this is really problematic because how can we fill this with white if the shape itself is filled with black? So if I do that, it doesn't make the inside of the star. So that can be a tough fix. Redrawing it is an option, but I'll show you another alternative here, which involves deleting all of the anchor points that are on the inside. Now, there are a lot of anchor points here, so that would be a lot of deleting. So the first thing to do is to take that object and look at the path and simplify the path. So as you can see there, taking this slider, it's got the same shape it did, and then you can drag this to the left to get fewer and fewer points. Now, if you go too far, this may not look much like a star anymore. So you have to decide how much work you want to save. So if I say, well, that's 15 points, that's the outside and the inside ones. So this should be fairly easy to do with just a couple of them. I'm going to press minus on my keyboard. That brings my delete anchor point. And now I'm going to delete the anchor points that are on the inside. Sometimes the curves may do very strange things, like even go outside of your original shape. But once you delete every anchor point, you will have a filled in shape. Now there's no stroke on this star right now. So if I add a black stroke and increase its size, looks like I may need to select that again. There we go. Now changing that to a black stroke on the outside. And now we've got the kind of shape that we may have thought we had before, where we've got an inner fill and then an outer stroke. So if you outline things this way, you then have the ability to make that stroke smaller or bigger. You can do things like the effects of inner glow and a bunch of other stuff that you can't do if you use the Blob Brush tool to outline things. When you're making a shape with the Blob Brush tool, you really should use the largest blob possible. So let me use that just as a reference. Okay, so that's now my reference graphic. I can even take that star and lower its opacity so that, let me see, oops, that's layer 24. Let me make this star, lower its opacity, and I'm going to use it as my reference. So going back to the Blob Brush tool, on layer 24, I'm going to start with the largest brush that I can, and then with my fingers on the bracket keys, I just make it smaller and fill that in really quick. So this is designed to make these shapes quick. So it doesn't take forever to draw what you're wanting to create. And yes, sometimes you might need to make a little small one and do a little bit of touch up, but the amount of time spent outlining this is just, it's taken way too long on some of these drawings. Now that object may not look exactly like what we had in mind. Let me hide that original star there and go to Object, Path, and I can see the Simplify. Now it's got an orange color there, so I can reduce that down, or I can do the smoothing. So object path and then just smooth and increase the amount of smoothness. So I created that star from scratch with the blob brush. And yes, it is not really pointy, and you might want to go in and look at some of these anchor points, maybe even use the curvature tool and pull that out a little more. And you can get the kind of shape that you originally intended without spending all that time outlining it and then not be able to use it.